boating instance, our drowning instance are in there. There's not a state mandate in Georgia for that. There's no agency that's really responsible by law, but we feel like we own that for the most part, so we keep up with all drownings in the state. And then hunting instance, we actually ask the vendor to configure a hunting instance. It has tree stand data, and it's a very, very, very detailed report. Resource warning, resource citation, a traffic ticket, a lot of different things that you can do. And this is just an example of a resource citation. So you can have a defendant, their name, all their information. You can import this from a GCIC query. You can also have a witness tab. So if Colonel Ryder's the witness, I can import him in, and he's in the report as the witness to the violation. The amount of information you can put in a report is just unbelievable. You can tie vehicles, guns, boats, other articles to the same report or the same incident. This is a boating incident. Again, it's the same thing. If you look about the middle of the screen, there's a GPS. You can use the GPS on the computer. You can pick from a map. You can edit it. There's just, the sky's the limit with this stuff. And then just one of the other benefits is Brant was here and talking. This is our view from Brant. I just looked myself up and it shows my license. So the officer, when he pulls up on a WMA or on a county road and he sees a truck parked off the side of the road with a tag number, we have our affidavits on file. So he can run the tag and say that's John Doe. He can look on an online database and see if there's an affidavit. If John Doe is listed on that affidavit, well, he is, and then he can also run his hunting license, see if he's valid. If he is, he just keeps on going. So there is a wealth of information. We also do game check in Georgia, so we know what he's harvested already. We just started that this year. So the benefits, real-time tracking of officers by dispatch, at least the vehicle. We do not have the same system that Tennessee does, so the button on our radio does not send out an alert, but it does on the CAD. Officers can see each other's location. Tracking of information related to calls, the communication centers can see that. We have worked very closely with troopers. There's been fatality wrecks or things where we've been a half a mile away. Troopers been 30 minutes and we've assisted, and vice versa. We've had them hold night hunting suspects for us and stuff like that. Other department database, the internet, Google Earth is huge, looking for things. And then more efficient use of officers' mobile time. Our officers do everything in the front of their truck. There's no driving 100 miles to the office to turn in paperwork anymore. They do it in the truck. They stay in the field. They may set it in a WMA and do their monthly or weekly reports. So they're out in the field, accessible to the public. Lessons learned. This was a huge change in the daily routine of officers. When I was the captain in first region meeting and I told our officers we were going to do this, they were kicking and screaming. You mean to tell me you're going to start tracking me? I can tell you today, when a computer doesn't work, they don't want to work. It is part of their culture now. It's their lifeline, and they feel like they cannot be effective without it. It's unreal how the culture has changed. Training on how to use the system. We provided initial training. Believe it or not, some of the officers in about a month said, did you know it'll do this? Did you know it'll do that? If they break it, our vendor has 24-hour support. You can call them. They can log in remotely to the computer and fix it. We pay for that. So there is an increased need for IT-related competence for the officers. They have to know where the power button is. Data retrieval issues and integrating legacy systems. If you're going to go to a CAD software or an RMS software, think about where you've been putting citations now. We were writing hand paper tickets, and the secretary was entering into a internal database. You may want to think about having that imported into a system so when you query somebody, you're looking at historical data. The maintenance of the system, who works on the computer, who works on the email, who works on the CAD system, all those things need to be worked out. It's almost a full-time job. Well, it is a full-time job, not almost. Communication centers, I think y'all have your own up here. That won't be a big deal. There is constant troubleshooting. They're computers. And as y'all well know, computers give issues. And then when you go with a vendor, you've got to communicate your business model. You've got to say, here's how we do business, make it work on your system. And that's really all I have, unless there's any questions.
We really appreciate you coming. It's a great presentation. I have a question for you. How long do you think it took before, say, 90% of your officers were competent on using the system? And then how long do you think before they wanted to use the system?
The competence piece with 90% of our officers, probably 4 to 6 months. It didn't take long, and that's probably on the high end. It didn't take long. It's a very intuitive system. We were using some of the features, not all of the features, but and within a year, everybody was 100% on board. We did it, you saw we had 7 regions. We just did a region by region deployment, and we'd do a region and they'd call us, well, when are you coming here? When are you coming here? When are you know, it was hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, we want it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Did you say it cost $1.2 million to implement that system?
It did, but let me explain that. We piggybacked with the State Patrol, and the system has 2 parts with any CAD system. There's the local software on the machine, which we pay for. We had to buy computers. We didn't have those. We had to buy the docks and everything in the trucks. But we piggybacked off of the State Patrol's network and infrastructure. There is a server backbone infrastructure that has to be in place for this that we did not purchase. And that's the reason we went that route, was to be able to save taxpayer dollars. So we got in at a really budget price. And then we pay an annual maintenance fee to get the latest upgrades. If you have a personal computer, you know every time you turn it on, there's some patch. Well, those patches have implications. Every time you go from Windows 7 to 8 to 9, it has implications. So we pay an annual maintenance fee to make sure we have the latest, greatest software that's compatible as well. So there's an ongoing maintenance cost.
Any other questions? Major Adams, we really appreciate you coming, and we don't want to beat you up too badly because we need y'all to beat Florida really, really badly. So, thank you.
We need us to beat Florida too for Kirby Smart. So thank you for having me.
I'm not going to prolong this too much, but I wanted to say some things that were more specific to the state of Tennessee and to TWR and how we came to where we're at with this. The first thing I wanted to say is we formed a committee back probably a year and a half ago. And when I was forming that committee, I looked at getting officers, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, majors, myself, the IT division, dispatchers, everybody that was going to put a hand on this, getting everybody involved with it. Because we wanted the input to know what we needed, what was applicable to us, so what components of a system we would need when we went to start to look for one and present this to y'all. And there's some things here I'm going to go through that we've identified. Some of them are going to be a little bit redundant, so I'm going to move through them pretty quickly. Number one, the most important thing is paramount to us is the safety of our officers. And what he said is absolutely true. The officers will be kicking and screaming right out the gate that we're tracking them. That is not our intent, is to track them to see where they're at, what they're doing. It's more for safety and to know where these persons are so we can get somebody to them as quickly as possible. And to go back to your question, Commissioner Ripley, the radio or the laptop, when you push that button, it drops a GPS location that goes straight to the dispatcher. It's being tracked by the computer GPS signal, but if you get away from there and you got your portable radio, it's not constantly tracking that person. You won't see him walking through the woods. You'll see the vehicle if it's still on through the computer, but when they push the panic button, it immediately sends a GPS location to that dispatcher and an alert. I wanted to make sure that was clear. And the other part that he mentioned was all the other officers can see where their coworkers are, and gives them that constant awareness of where they're working. Another question that I heard asked was, I believe Commissioner Ripley asked about if there was a bear hunter had been called for service, and we checked them. Every call for service that we get will be documented, and it cannot be closed in this CAD system unless the resolution is put into the system. So if you're called to a spotlighting call, a landowner call and says people are spotlighting, you go out there and you may work it 4 or 5 nights and you enter those each time, and it'd be no activity observed, whatever, then citation issued, whatever it may be. But the important thing about that is that we know that where our problem areas are, but the other is it can debunk calls where we have people calling in fictitious calls over and over and over again, whereas now with our incident system, if we have something that's going on like that where we have people that are seeing things that aren't really there, we can start that incident system and keep up with those so that we know that these are not valid calls over a period of time, and that we are answering the calls and that we're going out there and we're addressing the public. So that would all be documented. It's in there. It never goes away. And another part of this system is if you go to a call where somebody over here is spotlighting killed a deer, but somebody else is left with another deer, and you catch them somewhere in another county, these calls can be merged by the dispatcher and put both those calls together. And that can all be brought together. And there again, it gives us the ability to have those forever in our system. We talked about consolidation of services, systems, I'm sorry. We have a number of these, such as our dispatch, which is basically equivalent to a radio log now. It doesn't do much other than log what the officer says, I'm 10-6, wherever, and they write it down. We have an incident system, and the incident system is what I was talking about. We would put in when we have a boating accident or various number of other calls. Anything the officer wants to put in there and create an incident, they can. But every call for service in a CAD system would create an incident. We put in our own activity reports in a system that our IT division built separate. Our citation system, and I think this one's very important. And the major talked about this, the way they were doing it, where he would send in the citations and they would put them into the system and enter them. Right now, our data entry in Michael's division is we send in a green sheet off our citation. We have 4 copies. The green sheet has the species and the body of water, depending on what you're doing or hunting. And what it does, they enter that first. Then when the citation is adjudicated and there's the cost and fines are all put in, then that is sent in, they data entry that. The problem with that is there's a lot of errors in the data entry. And that's not because of Michael's personnel, it's because the handwriting looks like hieroglyphics sometimes. And you have people that misspell, change of wording on charges. We have them numbered, but still, it's amazing, but sometimes we can put fishing without a license in about 10 different ways. And when you get in there to look at it, you have this strange number that we know doesn't add up. And these would go into a CAD system where you come down to do the charge. There's drop-down boxes, has all our charges in there, and that one person that the major was talking about would be responsible for putting those in. And when you hit it, it locks it in. So everybody that's charged with hunting without a license will be charged with hunting without a license. And if you ask how many did we have last year, you would know to the number. And as he said, we could put in our boating accident reports, hunting incident reports, tree stand incident, our Tiber system, hog exemptions, deer damage, and that's a call for service. The deer depredation, animal depredation, when you go to a farm and look at it and put this stuff into our system, all the data entry, then you could go back and you could track that and see when it was done and if they've had them before, how many they've had, so on and so forth. They have in their system also that wasn't talked about, they have training and evidence modules in these CAD and report management systems. And we've been working really hard with our training to improve our training. And part of that is we're keeping a training file on every officer, every commissioned personnel in the agency. And this has a module that works with that is pre-built through their system in these CAD systems and report management. And also the evidence module, it would track evidence on a case. When an officer had a case, it would track the chain of custody completely from the time he seized it as evidence until the court was adjudicated on it. And it would be kept where it's barcode scanned in and out, and it's tracked completely, and there would be no chance of losing chain of custody on that. And the last thing that I was going to talk about is it has queries and analysis of our data. It would give us data, reliable data, to build annual reports, query for information at the request of our director, legislators, commissioners, and the ability to query by individual regions, districts, individual officers, You could do it by any listed field of data, such as species, the charge that they were charged with, the defendant's name, county, body of water, all of that in order to build a report based on our specific needs. So those are some of the things that were a little more just for TWRA and the things that we've identified that would help us. And I'd like to say that Captain Tim Sain has worked with me on this from the beginning and was on that committee. And Tim and I traveled to Georgia and visited with their system. He showed the picture of their system down there with the Highway Patrol. And we visited that. We spent a day with them, and we learned a lot just looking at their system. And I appreciate them coming up and giving us this program. And I think Colonel Ryder wants to say a few words, and we'll wind this up. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Chairman Cook. You've seen what we presented today. We greatly appreciate the time to allow us to come present the capabilities, the possibilities, and all that. And it's understood. It's a big deal. It's a great big deal, and we understand that. But you can see where we'd like to be. And thank you.
Darren, thank you, and I'd like to commend Darren, Kate, Tim, Michael May. They've worked on this for at least 2 years, and I can't imagine the time they put into it. It's obviously a complicated deal, but I think much needed. And one more real quick issue. If we do nothing, let's just say we do nothing, what does it cost us? And talking to Michael about it, it would cost us about $1 million over the next 3 years to just continue on with the system that we have, which of course is this antiquated system that certainly can't have all these capabilities. And just to keep that number in mind as we talk further through budget committee, because we're going to spend $1 million just to maintain something that's really still not taking advantage of all that we've already invested $7 million in to be a part of. So if Chairman Cannon, with your approval, can we roll this? The Law Enforcement Committee would recommend we roll this to the Budget Committee in December for further consideration. Is that appropriate?
Absolutely, Dr. Cook. Absolutely. And if there's no objections from the commission, Chairman Watson, I would ask that the Budget Committee bring forward a proposal at the December meeting regarding this, if it is the right thing to do, how it will be purchased. I realize that we'll be looking at a budget allowance, if you will, versus a formal proposal. With due respect to, the proposal process, this commission, this body, is the best one to deal with this, because we've been about this budget for a number of years together. We've locked arms, and to ask 5 new commissioners to get involved in this is not fair to them. So I would like us to at least consider a budget expansion that would basically be an allowance subject to proposals being taken. Let me express my appreciation to the folks who presented the CAD information. They were very intentional not to present the name of their product. Whether they propose or not is up to them, but it will go through the state procurement process, as is very, very appropriate. They were sharing information, and sometimes you just have to have a vendor that shares that kind of information, and we're most grateful to them. Major, great to have you as a partner and a neighbor, and you were mighty gracious to come up here and share with us today. And Dr. Cook, very few people on this commission know how much time you have put into this. You have done a remarkable job in gathering this information, and we are most grateful. Are there any objections to the commission, by the commission, to proceed this way at our December meeting? Hearing none, Chairman Watson, we're going to put that ball in your court, if that's all right. We're going to keep moving on, if that's all right. Darren, Kate, thank you, and thank you, staff, Michael. There's a lot of people to thank, and if I leave your name out, don't take it personal. Well done, very well done. Commission recognizes Chairman Jamie Woodson, Biodiversity Multiple Use Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to first thank all of the members of the committee for their hard work this year on the committee. I would like to ask Chief Bill Reeves to come and present on Recovering America's Wildlife Act.
Well, I don't have a PowerPoint. So, and what I wanted this to be, first of all, I put a lot of information in your notebooks and in the mail out about this resolution that we as an agency are asking you to sign off on. The purpose of the resolution is to support and act a bill in Congress right now that will provide additional funding for state wildlife agencies to work with and manage the broadest spectrum of wildlife out there. All the creatures on the face of the planet, basically, or in North America. So, in doing that, our leadership at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies in Washington thought it would be a great idea if they had a signed resolution from every wildlife agency in the state, so that when they go around to the congressional offices to garner support for this legislation, they have this document signed off by every agency in the country supporting that effort. There's a lot of information that I gave you. I'm going to try to give you a little additional information about this that you may not be aware of. The bill has been introduced into the House. The Senate hasn't seen it yet. They have sponsors and co-sponsors for the House bill. The Senate bill will be introduced in January or February after the election and the transfer to the new president and whoever the new congressional people are. That's the plan. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies has hired a person to lead this. They see this as that important an act. And to put this in perspective, in 1939, the Pittman-Robertson Act was passed. That established wildlife biologists if there were any wildlife agencies prior to that. Prior to that time, the only people in wildlife agencies were wildlife officers. After that, you began to develop the wildlife management strategies that we currently have. The same thing happened with sport fish. In 1950, the Dingell-Johnson Act was passed. That bill established the staff in this agency and the training that they got when they were graduate students to do the job that they do for this agency. This bill has that same implication. It will provide us with $21 million in federal dollars that we have to match 75-25, just like with DJ and PR. It'll be $7 million, and I'll mention something about that in a minute. But it will put us at the forefront of managing for species that are deemed potential candidates for federal listing. So the whole purpose of this is to keep them from being listed. Do whatever you can do to keep them from being listed. So this is a little deviation from what we usually do with, and just like in this commission meeting, what we talk about and what we act on. And when you talk about it obviously is not the job of the hunters and fishers in this state to cough up $7 million. The benefit is to all the citizens of the state, and we need to work toward the citizenry of this state helping to fund this money. That's not an easy task, I know, but the claim, and it's more than it's a reality, can be made that this is preventing the listing of species on the federal endangered species list, and therefore it's a benefit to every citizen of the state. It allows development to continue, and it allows people to continue to go about their lives like they think they should. So with that, let me open it up to any questions that you have.
Thank you. Well, one, do we have any questions from members of the commission? I do see Mike Butler, who has requested to speak, but do we have any questions right now? I have a lot of questions, and I'm hoping that Mike will illuminate, if he would.
Forgive me for interrupting. We have a resolution, and at some point, whenever it's appropriate, Chair,
Yeah.
I'd like the resolution read, because I think some of the commissioners are seeing this for the first time.
That's
It
right.
is in your books.
It is, and this is a resolution supporting another resolution, and forgive me, but I have actually not seen the actual resolution, and so I see the resolution supporting the act, but I don't have the copy of the act, and this feels like a really big deal. And so if it's okay, I'd love for Mr. Butler to make comments, but I feel like I'm needing information.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
at some point, and I'm anxious to hear Mike's comments, but I'd also like to call on Chris Richardson, who works with our state government and so forth, just to get his thoughts on this. So-
Sure. Great. Mike, you're recognized.
Mike Butler with the Tennessee Wildlife Federation. I wanted to give a little context from
Is
our
your
perspective.
microphone on, Mike? Sorry.
It's on.
Is it?
Hot, I think there we go.
Is that better?
Thank
There
you.
we go. Okay. Mike Butler with Tennessee Wildlife Federation. Just to give you some context to build on what Mr. Reeves has been talking about, we've been tracking this for the better part of a year and a half. It's important to note that this came out of a blue ribbon panel on recovering America's wildlife that was set up by AFWA, but it was chaired by John L. Morris, Bass Pro, and former Governor Freudenthal of Wyoming. And if you look at the members of the committee, it's a who's who of leadership in private outdoor recreation business, the oil industry with Shell Oil and Hess Oil represented, as well as a bunch of different large NGOs, DU, some of the others. It's a significant group of people that spent quite a bit of time talking through this. And I think it's important to note that that group has tasked 2 NGOs to lead the strategy for passage of the legislation. One is the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, which is the largest caucus in the U.S. Congress. They have more members in that caucus than any other caucus in Congress, House and Senate. The second group is the National Wildlife Federation, who we are affiliated with, and their CEO, Colin O'Mara. So Jeff Crane, the head of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation and caucus, and Colin O'Mara are the ones tasked with the strategy and the passage. So I wanted to make it really clear that it has a large private NGO component pushing it alongside of a lot of states. This is akin to what was tried in the 90s that resulted in what state wildlife grants we get today. It fell short. And so the state wildlife grants we get today that go to fund Bill's division, the $1 million roughly we get, came out of that effort when I first started 20 years ago in '96, somewhere around there. I will tell you that there are discussions going along about who will sponsor the Senate side. We are involved in those discussions. We're looking at Western and Eastern Senator. I think that there's I would put the probability of something passing very high because the oil industry is engaged in a real way and they're putting money into the effort now. And so I expect it's not going to be, now, it may not end up being 1.3 billion, but it's going to be a significant chunk, and it will provide a significant sum of money to come to the states that want to draw that down for that purpose. Having said that, the revenues right now, and this is not set in stone in any way, the revenues to fund this are projected to come from existing revenues from the Outer Bank offshore oil and gas development off the coast of the United States, and from some other federal public land energy development projects that are generating royalties that are being collected by the General Treasury. And so this happened once in the past, this concept of using existing revenues with the Land and Water Conservation Fund in the 1990s, when then Senator Alexander led the charge and got that done.
And so he is in the discussions and aware of this, and will most likely play, we hope, some sort of leadership role, given his personal interest in it. So.
I have a